you, team. I also wanted to give a big thank you to Coco Language Advocacy and Consulting for providing virtual remote services today. To view the closed captioning, which we've also provided, you can just click the CC live transcript at the bottom of the Zoom to see the subtitle. And we do this because we know that language and accessibility are key components of ensuring that all members of our communities can participate. We are always learning and trying to get better in our practices to improve our online events. So feel free to share any feedback with us throughout the webinar and after as well. All right, so get my instructions. So welcome everyone to our first digital safety lab, where we are going to explore assessing risk for online platforms with Tiny Gigantic. Hello everyone, my name is Adrian and I use the pronouns they, them, and theirs. I am the membership organizer at Media Justice, where I get to build power, connections, and relationships with our amazing Media Justice Network. Media Justice is dedicated to building a grassroots movement for a more just and participatory media, where we're fighting for racial, economic, and gender justice in a digital age. We're fighting for a world where we are all connected, represented, and free by using a variety of strategies that include digital organizing and digital self-defense. So thank you. And I wanted to introduce our amazing speaker today. So we are excited to have my friend, Myung, the founder of Tiny Gigantic, here today. Myung is a digital self-defense and community safety practitioner who is enthusiastic about making and breaking technology for social justice. They see holistic security as one of many superpowers that social justice movements have to care for each other, to be more sustainable, and to be stronger in the face of injustice. To them, digital security and safety issues are directly connected to the ways that we can better design, use, and regulate technologies for social justice. Yay. Prior to Tiny Gigantic, they co-founded the Research Action Design Research and Design Justice Cooperative. Myung holds a bachelor's from MIT and a master's from UC Berkeley, and is an overall amazing human being. So thank you, everyone. Please, let's give a warm, warm welcome to Myung.
Thanks so much, Adrian. Hi,
Yeah.
everybody. It's great to be here with you today. I am really looking forward to this time. Thanks for joining. Yeah, maybe I'll just read that out too. Just one note that we are recording today. We'll record in both English and Spanish. And there will be this like verbal notification that you'll hear. And you'll see a message on your screen when recording starts and stops. If you don't want to be recorded, please turn your camera off. All right. I will start sharing my screen. Can I get a thumbs up if y'all can see the slides? Great, thank you very much. So today is the first of our digital safety labs. I'm really excited for these. I heard from Media Justice based on last year that people would really like some time practicing these safety practices that we talk about so often, and not just sort of hearing about best practices. So I'm really excited. We'll have 4 sessions together, and we'll have a lot of opportunities to really get hands-on with things. Today, we're talking about assessing risks for online platforms. And practically what this means, everyone probably has this experience of having used a tool for a while and then reading an article in the news or getting a dreaded email from a company that lets you know that maybe there's been a data breach, or maybe there's been a malware attack on the company, or you notice that the service goes down for a period one day, and you realize there might be a security issue with my tool. So this is really addressing that issue that we all face now and then. Just taking a look at things and thinking about ourselves as activists, as organizers. what should we do when this happens? How do we assess what's happened, how it impacts us, and how we should move forward? In future workshops on Thursday, we'll do hands-on time with password managers. Specifically, we'll use 1Password Manager and 2-factor authentication specifically off the application. Next Tuesday, we'll do hands-on work with whatever computer and phone you have, and we'll make sure they're encrypted, that they have an antivirus program installed, and that we've installed all of your security updates. Thursday next week, we'll work again with whatever devices you have and make sure that you know where the cameras and the audio, the microphones are on those devices, that they're covered if you prefer that way, that we know how your devices measure biometrics and where and how to delete those if you ever want to. And the same for metadata and other hidden storage, like where your devices store videos and photos in different apps and in the device itself, and make sure that you have control over deleting those things as well. Okay, so without further ado, we'll jump into today's workshop. So what I would love to ask folks to do is first in the chat to introduce yourself. Please share your name and your pronouns and where you're joining from. And what's one platform that you're using and reassessing in your current work online? Welcome all. People joining from New York, Southern California, Colombia. Awesome. And I see folks are thinking about Zoom, Teams, Zoom again, Gmail. Great. Well, we'll have an opportunity to talk about Zoom for sure. And hopefully you can apply this to your thinking about Gmail as well. Feel free to keep introducing yourself. Welcome all. So the goals for today, I'm going to be sharing some safety strategies to address the specific concern about platforms that you're already using and when they have security issues. We're going to practice platform security incident response. So there's a process that I love to follow when issues come up, and we'll get a lot of time practicing. The agenda is, first, we're going to share how we're choosing tools already. Because there are a lot of things that go into choosing a tool in addition to safety and security. And I want to give people a chance to share those first before we focus on safety and security. Then we'll practice this response system, and then we'll break into 3 small groups. And I've set up case studies for people, one with Zoom, one with Blackbaud, and one with LastPass. I'll describe the case studies before we break into groups, but you'll then get to practice together the response with these case studies. And then we'll come back together and discuss. So please share in chat. Curious, especially about meetings, since here we are in this online meeting. What tools have you been using when you're doing online meetings? And why have you chosen it? So I'll share. I use Zoom when the groups that I'm working with want to use it. And generally that's for the support that Zoom offers around accessibility with interpretation. And on my own, I use a platform called Whereby for greater security and privacy. See Zoom, yeah, because people are familiar with it. It's a lot of people use it, has good language access support. Jitsi for security. Whereby for confidential conversations. Zoom. Yeah, we're in a moment where we see people saying that they're zooming in and they mean having a video call, and in the same way that when people say they're Googling, what they really mean is they're searching the internet for information. So yeah, not surprised to see a lot of Zoom in this. Discord for smaller community building, cool. Great. All right, so already I just wanted to surface that we are using different tools. Folks are familiar with this idea that there are different tools that are better for certain things for different reasons, whether it's for the kind of work that you want to be doing together, like building small community, or having more privacy or accessibility in language. So here's the practice that I want to share. And it's probably, you know, if you've ever had to face an incident together with your groups, you might have gone through something similar. This is just really breaking it down into a few clear steps with some specific questions. So when an incident happens, this is what I like to do. I like to pause and assess the impacts. And when I'm thinking about impact, I think about what are the impacts to individual people, to my community, to the organizing that I'm doing, and to the movement more broadly. We'll dig into how we do this. So that's really important to me when we're doing digital safety work in activism, in organizing, because that's what we care about. We care about our people, our communities, our safety and our power. And so that's where we start too when we have a smaller incident. And then we assess the risks. So thinking about who's been impacted, we then think about what level of risk does this pose? And I'll share again a strategy for choosing, like thinking about what level of risk. But basically there's low risk is, oh, we can bounce back from this. And anywhere to extremely high risk, which is maybe something that will impact us ongoing, that would be hard to recover from. Communication. Who do we need to communicate with about this incident? And what do we need to communicate? And then making an action plan. What actions do we need to take to recover from the impacts and to reduce the potential of this thing ongoing? And how are we going to document and monitor this situation? So together, we're going to do an example around Zoom and Zoom bombing. And the example here is specifically, you are hosting a membership meeting with peers, elders, and young people. And it is Zoom bombed by someone who unmutes themselves to make racist statements out loud and then attempts to take over the video, but fails to take over the video. You, as the admin of the meeting, mute them, you kick them out of the video call, and then you continue. So holding that case study in mind, we're going to do these 4 steps. And we'll do it together. What I would love to do is to share these slides. They're open and accessible for editing. Let me drop the link in the chat in one moment. So keeping this case study in mind, please open the slides using the link and go to slide 8. What you'll see here is some digital stickies. And what we're going to do is you can double click in a sticky and it will bring up a cursor, and then you can type in words. please go to this slide and think about, given the case study, what have been the impacts on individuals? I'll take some examples. Please share, who do you think as an individual has been impacted by the Zoom bombing incident in the membership meeting? Feel free to unmute yourself and speak up.
Hi, this is Ashley speaking.
Hi.
Hi, I think that all of the attendees were impacted on a certain level, so all of the audience.
Thanks, Ashley. Any other individuals people think are impacted by this Zoom bombing? All right, let's think about what could the impacts be to the organization that's hosting this meeting. If you were hosting this meeting, what would you be concerned about? What could the impacts be to you and your organization?
Hi, this is Kristen.
Hi.
I would say making sure that you're addressing like the emotional effect that it's had on the people there, and maybe not just like brushing past it, but just making sure everyone's okay. People, I guess for like impact, just like making sure you're doing that, because it could, I guess it just affects like how people see like your organization and how you address things like this.
Yeah, great. The right effect could affect how people see your organization. Let me make that text a little smaller. Yeah, thanks for helping take some notes in there. Other impacts that you'd be concerned about as the host?
Hello, this is Alexandra. I
Oh.
guess another impact will be the legitimacy of the organization, the work that the organization does, and the reputation forward because of that event. Thank you.
Thank you, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like this was something that people were really concerned about with Zoom bombing, sort of reputational impacts. Okay, I think also with Zoom bombing, people were concerned about how Zoom bombing incidents would impact fellow staff. So if I were facilitating this meeting, I would be concerned about my co-facilitators. How are they impacted? Will this make them feel less safe in hosting meetings going forward? So this is broken down just really sort of loosely based on ways that we organize. So the next tier of people that I would like us to consider are the people that support our work. So people who weren't necessarily in the meeting, but who do support our work, who would be aware that this happened, if this did happen, and what could the impacts be on that? Maybe something similar that we're saying about the participants and the staff, that supporters also might feel less safe to join in the future. They might feel less safe to host their own organizing meetings, something like that. And then more broadly, I also like to think about what were the impacts on the larger issues we're trying to organize around. And so an example of this for me that I would like to share is if this just happens once, then I think the impact on the issue might be very low. But if I see this as a pattern, for instance, if all of my meetings that are community meetings based on maybe the topic of community safety are Zoom bombed, then I'm concerned that there's a direct impact to my ability to organize online around community safety. So there's a potential, depending on the frequency, maybe. So sort of as a shorthand, all right. Yeah, depending on how frequently that happens, it has a potential to really reduce the impact of my work in this issue. Okay, so that's an example of how I would go about assessing impacts. And you can, depending on the issues, sometimes there's a lot more in one area than the other. Any questions before I move? Okay. The next thing that we do is we assess the risk that this incident poses. I'm going to try to show that a little bit bigger. So when we're assessing risk, I would like simple tools when doing this kind of work. So this is a 3-tiered risk measurement, and high risk is this incident resulted in the kind of risk to my colleagues, my community, and my organization that would be hard to recover from. That might mean serious physical risk or personal loss or damage to the organization. When we think about credibility of the organization, for instance, if it was hard for us to come back from the risk to our credibility, then that would be a high risk. Medium risk is something that certainly impacted us. It impacted individuals, colleagues, maybe the community, or even our work, but we can recover from it. If we reallocate resources, maybe our time or attention, we can recover from it and build back. And a low risk issue is something that poses minimal risk. We maybe have to pause and assess it, but then we can move on, and we don't have to allocate too many more resources. We can keep going. It's very basic, this risk level system of low, medium, high, and it will and it's meant to be. So it allows you to be flexible with yourselves and your organizing and the groups of people that you're working with. You get to determine what is high impact, medium, and low for yourselves. So looking at the impacts, let's take a look at it and think about together what among these are high and medium and low. And this will help us to figure out what we address first and how much time and effort we spend addressing these different things. So what do you think the impacts were to individuals? Emotional distress, rage, anger. Yeah, thanks, Adrian. And even the way you shared that to me, that to me shows me that actually the impacts to individuals might have been low to high. So if somebody is emotionally distressed, perhaps they can rebound or like recover from that even within the meeting. But if this inspires rage in somebody, it might really require them to have extra support from other people. They might need to really talk it through and work through Maybe it's bringing up other things for them. And so depending on the person, it might be low to high. Let's take another example of, let's talk about legitimacy of the organization and their work. Is that a low, medium, or high risk?
It could be high risk because it could mean for the organization not to receive any more funds if that spreads.
Absolutely. Yeah, your credibility, your legitimacy is extremely important. Could be a very high risk. So you would go through and take a look at the other impacts and talk it through. Was this high, medium, low risk for you and your work? And that helps you figure out, what do we need to communicate about this and with whom, and how do we address it? So for a moment here, let's just work through this example. Also, so given what we know about who was impacted and the kinds of risks, how would you communicate? Who would you communicate with about this? And what might you communicate? And what consent do you need to pause and get before communicating? I already heard someone share that within the meeting, as a facilitator, you would communicate and address the issue there. And maybe open some space to discuss. Would you also communicate with anybody who wasn't in the meeting? Who would you communicate with? Feel free to add it in the chat if you'd rather not speak out loud. People that registered and couldn't attend. Supporters. What might you share? Did Zoom bombing happen to anybody who was holding a meeting, who's here, or who attended a meeting? Ashley, yes. Sarah. And what would you have liked to have been addressed? What happened? Yeah. The measures the organization undertook to face the issue. Absolutely. And that would address many of the concerns that we spoke about. It would address, it could really address people's concerned about their safety in joining your future meetings. It would require you to discuss internally about how you would handle that in ongoing, which would in turn support your fellow facilitators going forward. You would have a plan. Perhaps ideas on how to prevent the incidents and what extra support is available to people post-meeting. Absolutely, that would especially help with any individuals who were experiencing high impacts. Okay, yeah, and based on that, sort of rolls together with this action plan. You know, what actions are you going to take to address the impacts? What actions will you take to reduce this issue on the impact ongoing? And what will you do differently? So I saw a lot of examples in there already. Especially put in place, offer support to participants. Share practices about how you will respond in the future. Yeah, and what might you do to prevent this issue in the future? Have a waiting room. Yeah. Yeah, you might develop some community agreements and say, if we have any interruptions, this is what we'll do and this is how we'll treat them so that everybody knows what to expect. About communication norms. Ask people to keep certain information confidential. Yeah, those are great actions to take. And is that enough? Do you feel like you can stay on Zoom and address all those issues? Registration. Yeah, I mean, I think this looks like a lot of actions and a lot of responses that people are able to take, both within the community. You know, you can make agreements, you can facilitate space in a certain way that makes it safer. And together with the way the tool is designed, you can use the tool to support your safety needs. So it does seem like that's all that sort of needs to happen. In other cases, you might need to ask, is one of our actions to look for a new platform? Okay, any questions about these steps so far? Impact assessment, risk assessment, communications and action plan. Okay. Okay, I'm going to introduce the case studies. The first one, so these are set up, you have access to the slides, but I'm going to share what they're about. So they have links in them, but what I'd love to do is make it so that if you would love to read more, you can click on those links. But for the purposes of today in this workshop, you don't have to read more. The case study with Zoom censorship is, the issue is that Zoom has censored activists. They've censored Chinese activists, and this was reported in 2020 in June. Chinese activists who were hosting commemorations for the Tiananmen Square massacre. At the request of the Chinese government, their accounts and their meetings were shut down. And Zoom, this came to light because activists reported it, and then Zoom posted in a public blog post that that is what happened. They received a request to shut these specific meetings and accounts down, and they responded by doing so. And that they would have to do so in response to government requests. They identified people based on their IP addresses, which allowed them to determine who was in China and who wasn't, and to shut down accounts in China. There's a second example of Zoom censorship, which is around Palestinian activism. This was reported last year in November. And Zoom shut down a seminar at San Francisco State University featuring Layla Khalid's Palestinian activists. Subsequently shut down events that were meant to be hosted on Zoom to discuss that. And they did publicly say that they shut down her account, and that that initial the initial seminar, because it could potentially have been regarded as supporting terrorist speech in the US. Okay, so that's the first case study. The second case study is around Blackbaud. So Blackbaud is a company that makes database tools, and they make a tool called Razor's Edge. Many NGOs use it for managing information about donors. And in May 2020, Blackbaud had a security incident. They were attacked by a malware attack in which a bunch of their data was stolen and then held at ransom. Blackbaud was told that they would get their data back if they paid money. Blackbaud responded by paying the money, and the malicious attack, like hackers, agreed to let the data go, to delete it, to not use it or sell it. It is believed that that data was not sold and was not shared further. And the third incident is LastPass. LastPass is a password manager. Are people familiar with password managers? Some yeses. A password manager is a tool that you can use to store your passwords. Oh yeah, okay, a lot of familiarity, that's good. So it's quite important that it's very secure. It's like the way that your bank stores your money. You want your money to be really, or your bank to be really good at protecting your money. Same way with the password manager. It stores your passwords and you want it to be really good at protecting your passwords. So there was a security incident with a password manager called LastPass, in which a security researcher found that LastPass's applications have trackers in them. The trackers don't communicate your passwords. They do communicate information about you using LastPass to advertisers. Information like where you're using the app from, what kind of devices you're using. Okay. So we're going to get into small groups, and I want to share how this is going to work. You have access to the slides. The first group is going to use slides 17 through 20, which look just like the slides we just used together. They will give you your scenario. You're using LastPass as your password manager. Review the case study and discuss what is the impact, or what are our impacts, our risks, what do we want to communicate, and what are the actions we want to take. For the Zoom group, you and your fellow organizers are using Zoom for public events generally. Review the case studies and decide about these steps, the impacts, the risks, your communication, and your action plan. And the third group will be a group that will be using Blackbaud's database tool to keep track of donors and donations, including some donors who wish for their donations to be anonymous. So review the case study and decide what you want to do. If you have language access needs, please remain in the main room and reject the room invite.
This is Adrian speaking. Are you ready to launch, Myung?
Yeah, can I just see, are there any questions? Okay, let's do it.
All right, sending them now.
Did anyone remain in the main room for language access?
This is Adrian. I'm checking the room. No, it looks like everyone is in a room who needs to be in a room.
All right. I'm gonna check in about time then. Thanks to Lonnie. The message that was like, you are 20 minutes behind. I was like, oh, not nailing that. Okay, so folks actually got into their rooms at 48. If we give them 15 minutes. Let's say, 3. Let's try that. Let's try to give them 15 minutes because they're in quite small groups as well. I'm gonna try to chat to everyone. Do you think I can?
Yeah. Do you want me to send that message to everyone?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
All right. Yeah, you got it.
Thank
Yeah, no
you.
problem. I can do it.
Do we have about 6 participants?
Um,
That's correct.
That seems right. Okay.
Actually, now that I look back, there's in room 3, we have 3 participants, room 2 has 2, and then room 1 has 2.
Great. Okay.
The us are like here.
Okay. That's good. No one's alone.
Mian, do you need, are you like readjusting time in the Google Doc?
Yeah, I just made this very messy note right here. To make I'm sorry, we end at 5:30, is that correct?
No, we have until 6.
Hey.
Yeah, I was like, I think
Oh,
you
great.
put in some extra time, so I wasn't too worried. Yeah.
Great. Okay, that's great. I still think 15 is enough for
Yeah.
small groups that small. So we'll try to do 5:30 to 5:35 or so. Report back discussion. And
Sounds good.
that should be spacious.
Mhm.
Can I get a little help with the report back timing? I would like to try to keep people to 3-ish minutes. Actually, you know what? We don't have a time problem at that point. We have till 6.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let's just let them be. If they are down to be chattier, I am down for them to be chattier. Tilani, before
Mhm.
Thursday, can we send a message to folks to ask them to make sure that they've come ready to use 1Password and Authy?
Yeah,
Do you want me to get more specific about what that means? I mean, like they should install it.
okay, yeah. Yeah, if there's any specific wording or anything you want me to use, I can send that message. Or if it's just, I think you had mentioned it in the descriptions, like that folks would need to come prepared.
Yeah.
I can send a reminder about that.
Hey, Aaron, how's it going? Oh, wait, there are three groups.
Yes, and Kristen from room 2 just asked for help.
Okay. Because actually, I wonder what,
Maybe,
well, I guess group 1 is working on, group 1 and the main room would be on LastPass. Okay. I'll pop into, I will try. How do you go into a breakout?
I was gonna say, so you, Myung, you want to go into room 2?
Yeah.
Okay, let me send you. No. It says that you got an invite, but not joined. So let me see if I can reset it. Did you get an invite there?
Yes, thank you.
Let me send you back to 2, so accept 2.
Okay. All right, I'm going in.
All right, bye.
Thanks.
I had paused it, so now it's back.
Startling. Oh my God.
Hello, welcome back. Welcome back from your small groups. So I know this is like a new process, and that was 15 minutes, and these are big questions. So in reality, when you practice this together with your fellow organizers, it takes much longer. But it would still be great to hear from your groups how it went. What was easy about it? What was hard? And where did you land with your action plan? So let's just start with the first group, with the LastPass group. What about that was easy? What was hard? And what did you decide to do?
Hi, this is Ashley. So in the LastPass group, I think it's kind of difficult sometimes to assess like if something is low, medium, high. I think this was my first time hearing about this incident. And so there are some things that I felt were subjective a little bit. So that was one thing that I thought was a little difficult.
Yes. Absolutely. Could you get into any specific, like maybe one specific one that felt very subjective?
Yeah, so I feel like, for example, obviously there's reputational harm that was done by, you know, like a business that's selling information to third parties, but like it's hard for me. I feel like that's something that could depend on the person, how much it bothers them, because also selling data and information to third parties is also like becoming more and more common these days, or it's like more prevalent. So it could depend on the person, for example.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so maybe if your organization or the issue you're organizing around is privacy and consent and clarity around data privacy and data rights, then you would need to get off LastPass if you were using it, because it would have violated your values around consent and data. But maybe that's, yeah, and it's really contextual, whether something is going to impact your work or your people or your organizing or not. It sometimes. I think all of these examples have a little bit of that. There's a little bit of like a political piece, which is why I think it's so important for us to consider the impacts to our issues when we're thinking about these incidents, especially as online activists and digital rights activists. We have to think about that when we see these incidents happening. Anything else about this LastPass case? What was easy or hard?
I guess, yeah, another example would be not being able to assess the level of risk of the information that was compromised, because LastPass stores information on a cloud, and if it's shared with a third party, you don't have a certainty of where the information went. So you don't have a certainty on whether there are going to be future impacts with that information and how personal and confidential it was. So I guess a lot of uncertainty that is hard to measure.
Absolutely. I think that's an issue with many or most data issues, that also, even when there's a data issue, we don't necessarily get told about everything that was impacted. So we often have to stay, like, part of the action plan is whenever there's an incident, for me, is who's going to monitor this and how? When are we going to check in
Exactly.
next?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it was also, you know, it also turned out that LastPass did respond. They spoke publicly. They shared some ways for people to opt out of tracking, and then also there are alternative password managers. So, did you decide that your organization can stay with LastPass? Did you choose something else?
We thought of maybe thinking of a more reliable tool that stores the information on the user server. So we thought of KeePass as an alternative than LastPass.
Thanks. Thanks, y'all. Does anybody have a question about this case study? Either like, what is LastPass, and can you talk more about the issue, or questions about the response planning? Okay. We'll move on to the next group, which was talking about Zoom censorship. Please share with us what was easy and what was hard, and what did you decide to do?
Right. So we had a little bit of a harder time with the impact assessment on like individuals, organizations, supporters, since it's kind of a broad, like it's very broadly impactful, but depending on the organization and whether you had one of the accounts that got shut down or what work you're doing, it can have different levels of impact. So yeah, we had a little bit of difficulty thinking about who are the individuals in the organization that we're assessing impact on. So we didn't actually get to the part where we decide what to do. But we were talking about the risk assessment in terms of, like, it could be high, medium, or low, depending on the work that you're involved in, whether it affected you directly or not, or the people who follow you. Yeah, so I don't know, we had a little bit of a harder time pinning down exactly how to move through this one.
Yeah, thanks. I think probably, I don't know if anybody else felt that, but I imagine that might have actually come up for other groups too, because the case studies are written pretty vaguely. So you would have to paint on a lot of your own assumptions, I suppose. So thanks for raising that too, Kristen. Mm-hmm. And then again, so risk is contextual. It's based on who we are, and that's who we are as individuals, what our personal histories and experiences are, all the way from there to what is our political context? What are the issues we were working on, and how would this potentially cause risks to us or not? That is true of all safety stuff. And so, so I think that's really right on. And so we can talk to this case because it does pertain to us. Here we are on Zoom.
Yeah.
Let's say for us, like, so let's say none of our, well, was anybody here, has anybody had an account get shut down from Zoom because of censorship? No. So it seems, I'll keep looking at chat, but it seems like maybe no on our individual accounts, we haven't been shut down. And then does the work of the people whose accounts we know have been shut down, these Chinese activists, the Palestinian activists, does that impact our work? I would argue that for some, in a solidarity sense, it certainly does impact our work. That for some of us, maybe it impacts our our value around social justice broadly, and the meaning of being able to speak out and having safe places online that are not censored for political speech. That isn't hateful, let's say. So to me, that's where I would land, given my work and my perspective. And so as an organization, I would choose to get off of Zoom for that reason. For other people, they choose to stay, maybe for reasons we shared earlier. Maybe it's where people are used to being, and so it is much more accessible in that sense, or it offers language accessibility tools that we need. Yes, in working to hold corporations accountable, having a global perspective is really important. These are US-based companies. Yeah. Many of the folks on the call right now are in the US, which is where Zoom is registered as a US corporation. We have potentially more leverage to hold Zoom accountable because we're here, if we're in the US. And getting off of it and urging our movements to get off of it might be a way to do that. I want to say, because some people on this call are also campaigners, that an action you might want to take is to prioritize action around this issue with this platform. So maybe you say, oh, we have to stay here. Most of our people are here. They know how to use Zoom. We're going to stay, but we're also going to launch this campaign that visibilizes censorship on Zoom. And in that sense, we can balance the impact to our issues and our organizing and our vision and our use of this tool. And as activists, I think that's a way we move through the world. So that could be also part of your actions. Okay. Let's talk with the group that did the Blackbaud case study. What was easy and what was hard for you all, and what did you decide to do?
Hi. I think it was a little bit difficult moving through, but we did get some ideas or some thoughts around how, if our just around how it would impact trust relationships with our donors, because then they may not feel safe to donate and share information with us about them. And we had a little bit of a plan. We would inform our community and address what happened, and share what supporter information was at risk, and then share practices on how we would address that moving forward as we go. We would seek support to create a security plan to rethink, just to make a plan on how we keep supporter information safe in the future, but then also rethink what data is essential for us to even track or to collect about our supporters, as well as even just assess if using Blackbaud is right for us, like if it's the right tool, or we would want to consider alternatives. And in the meantime, to kind of address the trust relationships, we would want to do high touch outreach to our supporters, and just kind of hold our partnership relationships in the center, and want to engage with them and see what works for us, how they can continue supporting us in the future, how we just we were thinking about what are our relationships with them, so that we can inform them and also just hold that trust relationship as we move through this whole challenge.
Thank you. Anything else? Yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate how much granularity in the communication also you were discussing. I think we could apply that to the other case studies as well. For instance, the Zoom one, if we are organizing a lot on Zoom and we don't quite know what to do, maybe we can reach out to people who we have good, trusted relationships with and say, hey, this thing is coming up. What are you doing? What should we do? How can we do this together? Or for instance, with LastPass, checking in with your maybe other allied organizations and saying, hey, is anyone else using LastPass? And how are you dealing with this? Are you going to stay? It's a hassle to switch, but seems a little bit worrisome to stay, and keeping in touch that way. I think that's absolutely a great part of communication strategy, is like teasing out the high touch and the low touch. I think oftentimes we think about what's the lightest touch we can take when we have a security incident, because it's hard to talk about. We want to hold information close to the chest, just in case maybe. We don't want to open ourselves up to more security risks in part, but then also it also comes down to sort of the if your information was highly impacted, then maybe people will rely on you less. So you want to be careful about what you share in that way too. So it makes a lot of sense. And I love that you brought out the trust factor in that. I think that's right. We can have different conversations with different people based on trust. And I think it's also, I also really appreciate that you brought this back to the practices of the organization on the whole. How are we gonna think about information that we might not even have to store in the cloud? We might not have to make this information digital, so it might not have to become susceptible to digital security threats. And that's true of many of these examples. I mean, with the password manager, we've already chosen to store our passwords somewhere safer. But maybe with Zoom, maybe you can say, what information do we not share over Zoom then, if we think it's susceptible to censorship or something like that? Those are great, really helpful in reflecting back on the other case studies. So I guess there's a resource that I want to share, which is this blog post on the Defend Our Movements blog. It's too small to read. We don't have to read it on the screen, but here is a link and we'll share it afterwards. The blog post I wrote for the Defend Our Movements blog, and it's about assessing tools. It's really about assessing tools like even at the start before we choose one, but it's also about how do we decide to switch? So it talks a little bit about how if we make the decision that we have to switch, how do we do that in a way that takes care of ourselves while we're doing it? Identifying the change stewards. So making sure we test out a new tool before we start using it, communicating well about using a new tool, researching and supporting people to get trained up. You have to think about that inside of an organization as well as with your members. How are you going to communicate about why you made a change and support them to learn how to use it, to stay with you, to stay in communication. And then I also run through a few ways of assessing trust and risk on platforms themselves. And those include, I can make this bigger, but these are some of the first questions I ask are, who runs the service? And what do they say their values are? That will give you some insight into whether or not you should expect that, for instance, this company is going to sell your data to advertisers. So you can make a decision up front. Do we want to store our data with a company that is also selling information to advertisers or not? How does that organization respond, take accountability, or address incidents when they occur? We want to see organizations that are really talkative. We want to see organizations that have blogs that do talk to journalists, that do respond very publicly about incidents when they happen. We don't want it to be kept secret. Who do they say they're serving? Who do they say their tools are built for and who it's safe for? For instance, do they stand up for the privacy and safety of activists? Tools that do are really proud of it, like Signal, for instance, the secure chat app is really proud of standing up for privacy and safety of activists, and they'll say it all over their tool and their pages. Are there examples of this service standing up for or harming activists? And what can that indicate to us? Is it open source? So has someone been able to look at that code and determine from a technical standpoint, does it look secure? And that information is also posted on tools websites. They'll say this has been reviewed by security experts, or this is open to review, for example. Is it end-to-end encrypted? So is it keeping our data private just to the people who are supposed to have access, like you as a user, or is it not? And is it open also to the company that runs the tool? How much information is gathered by the tool about us in addition to the information we're intentionally putting in there? And then where is the company based and where is its data stored? Sort of getting to the point that Dulani made about who can hold the company accountable, and then also whose laws is it subject to with respect to surveillance and privacy. So that's a resource that you can use sort of ongoing with your organizations as well. In addition to how do we respond when there is an issue, how would we assess some more about whether or not we can trust this tool? Any questions about that? Okay, the last thing that I wanted to share is there are a lot of ways to also make sure that our platforms are safer for us, in addition to whatever internal work we have to do to assess whether the tool is safe for us and our people. We can also jump in on platform accountability work. And I wanted to ask if anybody here has examples or campaigns that you want to share and bring people's attention to. Media Justice, I know, does a lot of tech accountability work. There's a link to theirs there. Color of Change is also a good group to support platform accountability. I wanted to share that if you are a user of Zoom, there was a class action suit that was settled recently, and you should automatically get communication so that you can claim money. They will pay, the payout will be some percentage of the amount of money you paid them, or $25, whichever one is, I can't remember, the greater one, I think. And there's information here about that. There's a link in the slides. Does anybody else? I know everyone here are organizers. Are there other campaigns that you'd like people to know about? Feel free to share as you're thinking of it. All right. So just wanted to say thank you for your time and for your work. And I'm curious if people can share evaluation and appreciations, either in the chat or you're welcome to write in this last slide here. Actually, we're such a small group. What I'm going to ask is, before we close out, can everyone share? Yeah, are there any questions? Do you have any questions about like any of the tools that we use, the impact assessment, risk assessment, or the communication and action planning? If you're thinking about using that in your own organizations, any questions? Or we have plenty of time. Are there tools that you're using that you're trying to assess that you'd like to talk through together?
Hi. I am trying to assess Meet Jitsi. I consider it a very reliable tool. However, I have a couple of incidents. I was sharing a link of a meeting with some co-workers to join them in a call, and all of a sudden I got took to another meeting. I think they were speaking in German. And then I show up in their meeting and people were very concerned and asking me where I am, what did I want, and who gave me the link. And I just apologized and told them that I wasn't meant to be in that meeting, that I was looking to my meeting. So it seems like it's end-to-end encrypted and that gives you some reliability, but at the same time, these incidents are quite often, I have heard. So that makes me wonder what other tools, because I don't use Zoom, well, if there's trainings I do, but not for personal purposes.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Have other people had that experience too? Where you're trying to join a Jitsi meeting and you end up in the wrong meeting? And then Alexandra, were you able to determine, did you have the same link?
Yes, I don't
Ah.
know how,
Yeah.
but yeah, I did have the same link.
So when we use Jitsi, you can see I'm showing on the screen, you can automatically generate a link for your meeting, and it's meant to be very random. They build these strings of link words, and they should be unique, but it sounds like maybe there's some problem with the randomizer at times. That is concerning, and Jitsi is good for privacy because it does have end-to-end encryption if you turn it on, but even if it doesn't, Jitsi, the company, for some of the calls, if it's not end-to-end encrypted, could potentially decrypt in the middle, but they don't store anything. So we don't have the same problems as Zoom. There's no storing, and they're not keeping track of like users in the same way, right? Like we can just sort of automatically join.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't be ahead of time trying to block us, for instance.
Yeah.
A good one tool that I do like to recommend is Whereby. So if you go to whereby.com, it opens. Whereby is a Norway-based tool, and you can use it for free or for paid accounts.
No,
It
that's great.
offers end-to-end encryption for groups that are, if you're on a call with 4 people or less, it's end-to-end encrypted. And anything larger, it has the same security basically as Jitsi. It's encrypted to Whereby, and then Whereby needs to decrypt it to send it back out to everybody in the meeting. But they don't store the information. And it's a company that's based on privacy, like built on trying to keep things as private as possible. So they do make commitments to not doing things like not censoring.
Thank you. This is very helpful. I will give it a try.
Yeah,
Thank
see if
you.
it works for you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have other tools you like? No fancy filter. Yeah, not as it has. Maybe they'll have them eventually. It's not. There aren't as many cute like mustaches to put on your face and animations and things.
This is Ashley. So I'm wondering if then how Whereby is different than Jitsi, other than that Jitsi hosts more people.
Whereby does host. You can host certainly as larger as actually a larger meeting. Jitsi publicly says that like you can kind of put as many people as you want in, but the quality of a Jitsi meeting starts to decline after about 30, I think. And with Whereby, that's not true. You just but you would have to pay for an account in order to host. Let's see, your free account, you can have up to 100 participants in one meeting.
Right, but is it end-to-end encrypted for even with larger than groups of 4?
No, at that point, it's just encrypted to the service and then back out. And so you're relying on the same way with Jitsi, we're relying on whereby to say they're not snooping on the content and they're not snooping on users.
Okay, so in that regard, it's similar to Jitsi.
Yeah, yeah. It's the same in that regard. Yeah. Any other questions coming up for people? Finding alternatives is remarkably, like, it really takes a lot of talking to friends and comrades because of, yeah, because there's the platform, there's small number of platforms that dominate common use right now. And I think it's great to, yeah, it's great to ask each other what we're choosing instead, especially for the most dominant ones. Like Google has a real dominance in search and email, but there are plenty of other providers.
One thing that comes up a lot, this is Evelyn. One thing that comes up a lot with folks I work with is the question around whether to use Google Docs or not, or like Google spreadsheets for information about participants. That, like, I help a lot with organizing events online. And so that question always comes up.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a very low volume, sorry. Not sure how to fix that.
Thanks.
But what are your thoughts around that? What do you usually advise?
Yeah. So it depends on the kind of information. And so, well, it depends on two things. One is, what information are you storing in there? And then two, what are the risks? So let's talk about the risks first. With a Google document, it has good security from Google. So they have a really good security team. It would be very hard for anybody, like a malicious hacker, to break through their security measures. But it's a US based company, and it's very susceptible to US surveillance from the state. And it's susceptible to access through legal means. So if you ever ended up in a court case where those spreadsheets were relevant to the case, they could be susceptible to subpoena and being revealed in court. So if you have information that you can't, that's too high risk if it were accessed through surveillance or court cases, don't store it on Google, on any Google product. If it's so never write, for instance, somebody's like information about someone's legal residency status in Google communication. But maybe if it's a first name or if it's initials and they attended or they didn't attend, that's no problem. I would. So then the other thing is, it's only as secure as you use it. In addition to that, so against the malicious hackers, if someone tries to break like break into Google's databases, it would have a hard time. But if someone tries to break into your account, you have to protect your account also. So the best things to do there are to have a really good password that's unique and hard to guess. So it's generated by a generator and not by your brain, which is not that random. And then the other thing is to turn on two-factor authentication. Do you know what that is? Cool. Yeah, so with a good password and two-factor, and then Google's built-in security, it's pretty secure against regular hackers, which includes most of your political opponents who would hire regular hackers. But it's not good against states that can leverage laws against Google. Yeah. What else? What other questions do folks have?
Alexandra wrote that there's a French alternative to Google Docs.
Maybe Zoho? Is that French? Yeah, there are, oh, CryptPad actually is French. Yeah, I really like this one too. CryptPad, and I think at least since the last time I used it, I just started using it again last week, and it has some better features now. It has better formatting, which I find is really useful for me. I think I must be quite a visual processor of information, and so it's really helpful for me to be able to format text in a document. It helps me read it better. And what I found recently using this was like that it had more tools than I remember it having. For instance, I could make a heading much bigger or even choose a heading setting. And I like that. If you can create an account on this tool, CryptPad, and then sort of save documents and share them with specific people. Or if you want to use it without creating an account, you can just start up a pad. I would say if you're putting, it is end-to-end encrypted. So only you and the people you share it with can read it. But if you're using it for very private things, I would start an account and share it really carefully and directly with other people who have accounts. You can co-edit at the same time. So that's something that people really need in Google Docs. If I share this link, people could get in there and type with me. Rise Up pads. Yeah, I don't want to leave anybody out. Rise Up pads is a similar service. It's using a thing called Etherpad, which looks like this. And you can similarly type with other people. So yeah, it's great. People, if you jump in there, you're given a color. And so if other people jump in there, for instance, if you want to play around, there's a link for that one. Here's a link for the CryptPad one. You can get in there and see, yeah, this person jumped in, and if you start typing, whoever jumped in there, your text is going to look pink. So it's kind of a nice way of seeing who typed what. Yeah. So there's one, and this is the same. This is Etherpad. But these tools are hosted in a similar way that Jitsi is hosted. You know, you can go to meet.jitsi and start an event, or maefirst.jitsi. In the same way, you could host your own Etherpad if you wanted, and that's what we just saw at Rise Up. Otherwise, stumped. I haven't used it in a minute. You can go to Etherpad and start up one pad as well. Finding people who run Etherpad, I can go here. Oops. And with these things, with hosted services, you always want to choose a host that you know and trust. So I'm actually not going to choose one right now because I haven't prepared this and I don't want to lead us astray. But I do know Rise Up, and so I would trust their instance. And the reason we need to trust the host is that oftentimes they could or do store a copy of the information. For instance, this Rise Up pad tells us that by default they're going to store this pad for 60 days. If I append the word keep, they would store it for a year. And if I append temp, it would only be stored for 1 day. But I want to trust whoever is storing it. Yeah, other examples or questions for coming up? We have like 15 more minutes in scheduled, so we're welcome to stay and keep talking. You're also, yeah, welcome to go. Firefox Send is not available anymore. What's another alternative for large files? I love this tool called Treasurit. Treasurit is a company that's based in Switzerland. It's to me, I like to choose tools that are in the EU because the EU has good privacy protection. So by default, a company that's based in the EU has to agree to certain privacy protections about our data as users. We have more control over like how they store it, asking them to delete it, things like that. Treasurit has a number of tools. They have an alternative to sort of a Dropbox where you can store files. They also have a thing called Treasurit Send, which I really like for sharing files. Pardon me while I look for the link. It's probably faster for me to look up Treasurit. Okay, the link is send.treasurit.com. It is in the chat. And what it does is it allows you to upload a file up to 5 gigs. Is that as large? Alexandra posed the question. Is that as large as you're thinking or larger? Okay, cool. Yeah, so Treasurit Send allows you to share a file and then to get some information when people access it. You can get an email every time someone accesses it. It's kind of like a one-time sharing tool. And it gives you a link. If you sign up for an account, you can sign up for free Treasurit, which has some limitations about how much information you can store. I think it's 5 gigs of data. And you can have, I think, 10 sharing links within that data at any given time. That's send.treasurit.com. You don't need an account and there's no limit. It's just that one file. Does anybody else have sharing tools you like? I have people, friends and colleagues who use mega.nz. That just redirected me, so I'm gonna look that up. It does seem like it changed. Okay, so Mega NZ is another one that that is committed to privacy. I'll just accept cookies for the sake of this, and is offers some sort of like short-term sending and storage as well. It's based in New Zealand. Share.riseup, show this one. Great. Thanks. I want to say with Treasurit also, Treasurit also has a request service. So if you sign up for an account, you can request files be uploaded to you securely end to end. And you get a link and you share that link with people. And they can use the link to go to a site where they upload a file that looks like this page, the send, and it gets sent to you. You get a message and then you can review it before accepting it to your Treasurit account. So there's a bunch of security features in that process that I like a lot. Specifically, I really like that it gives people a way to upload files to you without needing to sign up for anything, and it's end-to-end encrypted. Any other questions? All right. Well, I'll stick around to the end of the hour, but see if any other questions come up. But my question for you is, before you check out, can you I am curious to hear from folks if you feel like you'll be able to use, like, what part of the response process that we did today do you feel like you'll be able to use in your own work? For some reason, I can no longer see people's videos. Can you? Know what I've done. Oh, there we are. I guess I have to share. Okay. Yeah, I am curious. Would people be willing to speak out loud? What part of the process today you'll be able to bring back to your works?
Hi, I really like that the matrix that you share with us. I sometimes think that it's hard to think of the effect that an incident will have on many people. And organizations tend to address quickly the impact it had directly on the organization and the workers, but maybe not the ability to think broader. So I think that matters is really helpful to kind of have a holistic view of the greater impact that could lead to an incident.
Thanks. Ashley shared, I appreciated hearing the platform alternatives. This info is helpful along with pros and cons of each.
Hi, this is Sarah. I really appreciated the sort of sort of initial assessment, the 4 points. I think sometimes when security issues happen, they can actually have a lot of like emotional impact. And so something very simple, like a 4-step process, really switches from a panic state to okay, let's take action and provide some breathing. So I think that'll be the tool I'll use the most.
Great. Is anyone else still on who will be able to bring anything back?
I think the communication, this is Ebony, the communications and action plan was really helpful to not only, you know, for my own organization, but also for organizations in our network when they are thinking through this. I think this is really, really, really helpful.
Cool. Great. I think that's everyone, unless anyone from MJ. All right. Thank you all so much for spending so much time here. And I hope you come back. Well, the other ones will be doing like, I'll demo these specific tools and then we'll just go through, we'll take the time to actually try out using them. Because we often don't get to that part in a workshop. So we'll do that in the lab. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, interpretation team, access team. Really, really appreciate all of you.